Good evening, everyone. I want to give a big yasher koach to Aryeh for making this happen, and to everyone who helped him out. We at the Post believe it's very important to encourage events like these, to encourage our readers, the English speakers in Israel, to participate in the democratic process in Israel. And that's why it's so wonderful that such events are organized and that Likud Anglos is thriving now. Having this distinguished panel tonight, where you have a current person running for Knesset, a person who ran in the past for Knesset, and someone who may in the future run for Knesset, but right now is running for the Likud Central Committee, who all are English speakers, is an absolute beautiful thing. And so the first question is the easiest. Now I want the three of them to come up and explain who they are and their point of view on the coming race on January 31st.
So I don't know who of you knows who I am, so I'll just tell you a little bit about myself so you know where I'm coming from. I like to think of myself as what you might call an Israel activist, because my story doesn't start. I made Aliyah 2 years ago. My story doesn't start 2 years ago. It starts my political story starts when I was 18. And after that, I went to law school, and I was a volunteer for the Legal Forum for the Land of Israel. I helped them raise money in the States, and I helped them spread their message. And then after I graduated law school and was admitted to the bar, I came to Israel, and I wanted to find a place where I could get involved.
The Likud really is the only serious place for a nationalist style politics. It's the only serious nationalist movement. So that's where I wanted to get involved. And I came across this group called Likud Anglos, which had been defunct, and we got things going again. And I'm proud to say that we're probably 3 times as large and as active now as Likud Anglos ever was, even during the elections at the time. And we don't get really any official support from the Likud party itself. Where do we stand in these elections? Well, I know this is the sexy issue. What's going on right now is Netanyahu versus Feiglin. A few weeks ago, Likud Anglos had an event with Moshe Ya'alon. Somebody said, well, if you're going to be so tough on security and anti-concessions, what about the Bar Ilan speech? And Ya'alon surprised me with the things that he said. The first was, we've inherited a heavy burden. We have, aside from the Oslo process from the beginning, but let's just not go back that far. Let's just talk about the last 2 administrations, last 2 prime ministers. Sharon endorsed the roadmap, and then he carried out the disengagement. And then Ehud Olmert tried to do a convergence. And then after that, he tried to do his own premature peace plan. And thank God, Abbas didn't accept it. The Arabs always save us in the end. He said, these are Ya'alon's words, that we have a Boeing 747, we have a jumbo jet aircraft. And an aircraft doesn't swivel, doesn't just turn around, they can't do a 180 in one shot. And these were his words. He said, Bar Ilan was part of our maneuvering. Now, I don't agree with Bar Ilan, and I share a lot of your frustrations. I don't think Bar Ilan was necessary for that. But we have to give credit where credit is due. And Netanyahu stood up to Obama in the White House, and then a week later got 29 standing ovations in the Congress. That's not a small achievement, especially when we're dealing with the most anti-Israel administration since Jimmy Carter. Now, I'm not saying that any pinuyim are justified. I don't think Ehud Barak has a place in our government, or any government, or even in the Knesset in any way. That guy should be done in politics. And we should also appreciate the positive things the government has done. Moshe Kachlon just recently built an antenna. What's my time?
You're pretty much done.
I'm pretty much done. Well, I'll sum up with this since I have... the real election going on is not between Netanyahu and Feiglin. I think... I'm not going to say that you don't have a sikoi. I heard your speech at the convention. But at the end of the day, it's going to be more achuzim or less achuzim, and maybe there will be a message sent to Netanyahu, or maybe there won't. But the real election going on the 31st is the Central Committee. That is the body that's going to determine where the party is going for the next 10 years.
My name is Shmuel Sackett, and I'm the co-founder and international director of Manhigut Yehudit. We decided to build an alternative leadership for the Jewish state, hence the group Manhigut Yehudit, Jewish Leadership. And we were apolitical for a while until we finally came to the conclusion that if you're going to talk about leadership, you might as well try to lead the country yourself. based on Jewish values. And the concept here, it wasn't just the peace process, it wasn't just settlements, it wasn't kibbut srugot, it was leading Israel based on Jewish values, Jewish pride, a strong, proud Jewish state of Israel. And when we entered politics in November 2000, we could have started about the 37th right-wing party, but we obviously didn't want to do that. There's been about 32 since Yamit. Most of them have come and gone very, very quickly and have really drained a lot of the strength that the right wing has by splitting the vote. We took a look at the map and we took a look at one party that we felt we could call home, and that's called Likud. Likud is a national party made up of primarily Masoreti Jews, overwhelming majority, who want Israel as a Jewish state, who are opposed to religious coercion as Moshe Feiglin and I are, who want Jewish education for the kids, who want Jewish family values, who want a Supreme Court that is not like the Supreme Court of today, who wants a media that reflects Jewish values, who wants a strong army. This is Likud. But it had been hijacked by people that took Likud a different way. And I always say there's something you have, when you take a look at Likud, you have to divide the two. You have to divide between the leadership of Likud and the membership of Likud. The membership of Likud today, as I speak, going to the polls in a week and a half, will be potentially 130,000 voters. Those people have the zchut, have the merit, the ability to vote. They're eligible voters, 130,000. And these people primarily, as what I mentioned, want a strong and proud Jewish state. And this is what we appeal to, this is what we talk about, this is what we try to lead them, and we've been running in Likud since November 2000. As a matter of fact, Moshe and I are members of Likud longer than most Likud Knesset members today and many ministers in the government as well. I just wanted to wrap up by 1 minute by just one thing that Daniel said, and that is that I humbly disagree and respectfully disagree. In a week and a half, while the Central Committee is important, as well as the Moetzet Snifim, the local Snifim elections, I believe the main election, the main event, as we would have it, is Prime Minister Netanyahu versus Moshe Feiglin for the head of Likud. This is your chance to say enough is enough. We don't want a Likud whose leader wants a Palestinian state. We don't want a Likud whose leader wants a leftist Supreme Court. We don't want a Likud who appoints Ehud Barak as a defense minister. We want Likud as a strong, proud Jewish state. Vote for Moshe Feiglin. I will be doing the same, and I ask you to do the same in a week and a half.
First of all, I'll start with a disclaimer. I'm not exactly an Anglo, I'm a Franglo. Even though my wife is American and she also came here tonight, and I participate in this debate. I was born and grew up in France. I went to school, college, to this school that educates all the political leadership in France. It's a school that was supposed to turn me into a high civil servant in France, turned me into a convinced Zionist. And I met Aliyah in 1993, and I met Aliyah not knowing any Hebrew and not knowing anybody in Israel. But Baruch Hashem, it's the best decision I've ever made. But I was amazed to see my professors and classmates in university denying reality, no matter what was happening, the terrorist attacks, the fact that Arafat was lying. They kept saying, no, it's fine, it's going to work out. So eventually what people call the second Intifada, even though technically it's already the fifth Intifada historically, broke up in September 2000. I was horrified, like many Israelis. As I said in the beginning, I myself was not opposed to the Oslo Agreement, but as I always say, I used to be liberal, but I stopped because I got tired of being always wrong. So, eventually I just joined the Likud. I just joined the Likud in September 2000, thinking I was going to save the country just by being a Likud member, and then I realized what the Likud was all about. At the time, Sharon was the chairman of Likud. And when I realized how corrupt the political life was in Likud I was not very excited. If you remember, Sharon got elected in 2001, and he set up a government with Labor, and it took him about 2 years to react, to put an end to the massacre of the daily massacre of Jews by terrorist attacks, because he had to keep his coalition together. And then when Likud finally won the elections in 2003, you would have thought that finally we would have a right-wing policy of protecting the country. And then lo and behold, Sharon pulled out the disengagement plan from his pocket. So after spending all these years in university and realizing what both the university in Israel was about and Likud was about, I decided to run for elections because I need a break from politics. Being an academic, I can tell you what politics is about, and at least if you're going to deal with politics, let's go for the real stuff. And I figured that the reason why, in Israel, when you vote for the left, you get a left-wing government, and when you vote for the right, you get a left-wing policy, is because, as a matter of fact, governments don't really wield power. Because the left, since it lost its majority in 1977, has managed to keep its hold on power in the Supreme Court, in academia, and the media, which is why you have this phenomenon of prime ministers being elected by Likud, and then the decision of the Knesset are being cancelled by the Supreme Court. You have this daily brainwashing system from the media telling you that if you don't have a Palestinian state, it's going to be the end of the world, and eventually people just believe in it. And I very much believe that the reason, again, I'm running today is because I believe that the way to change the country, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but at least I'm saying to myself that if I don't try, then I'll never forgive myself. And I think that we can try and change the Likud from within. Many people, in my opinion, have proven in the past years that it's possible. I did not join Likud with Manhigut Yehudit. I joined by myself. I think that there are many good things that Manhigut Yehudit did, and there are a few things I don't agree with, but I do believe that you can change the Likud from within. You just have to look today at the way the list of the Likud is composed. I mean, if you compare with 2003, in 2003 the Likud list was basically a bunch of criminals and people who got there because they paid money, and it's not a coincidence if Sharon was able to buy up the people who voted for the disengagement plan, because the list was very corrupt. Today you have MKs who are very, very, very good people, who are very faithful to the platform of the Likud, people like Yariv Levin, like Dani Danon, Tzipi Chotoveli, and many others. So yes, I do believe that you can influence from within, and if we don't want in the next elections to have again a prime minister from the Likud who's going to say, we want a Palestinian state, and we can't really touch the Supreme Court, and we can't really touch the media because it's anti-democratic, and you have members of Likud, ministers from the Likud who say, you can't touch the Supreme Court because it's a holy cow and it's against democracy to have judges that are not appointed by judges, blah, blah, blah. In other words, you have Likud ministers talking exactly like the left. I think it's possible to change from within. So the bottom line is, what is my position on the primary elections? Well, my position is that regarding the primaries for the chairmanship of Likud, I think that what Netanyahu did was very tricky. I don't think it was right to advance the elections, even though I can understand for political reasons why he wanted to get rid of Silvan Shalom as a contender. But I think the election should have been held on time before the general elections. But since they're taking place now, my position today is that Netanyahu is an excellent manager, an excellent public speaker, that the economy is doing great, that he's managed the Obama administration pretty well, but I'm very upset at his policy regarding the outposts, regarding the reform or lack of reform of the judicial system, and regarding the rumors that Ehud Barak would get a job in his next government, and this is why I think he should get a message very clearly from the Likud that he does not have a monopoly, and that's why I will vote for Feiglin, but just because I know that he will not be elected. If I thought that Feiglin would have a chance to be elected, I would not vote for him, but since I know he will not be elected, even though I respect him and like him very much on a personal level, he will get my vote in order for Netanyahu to get the message that I think he should be getting from the Likud. Thank you.
Before I ask you questions about policy, which I intend to, I want to ask you about the headline in tomorrow's Jerusalem Post. There's a group of Likud activists who, starting tomorrow, are starting a campaign to boycott this election. They want to send a message to Netanyahu for all the reasons that Emmanuel talked about outposts, about a Palestinian state. They want to send a protest vote to Netanyahu. But they don't want to do what you're doing. They don't want to vote for Feiglin. They believe that Feiglin has weakened the nationalist camp by running all the time. So I wrote about what they said, and I got a reaction from Moshe Feiglin himself, who said he doesn't understand why they don't just vote for him. And I got a reaction from Netanyahu's campaign manager, the mayor of Modi'in, who said he's confident that everyone's going to vote, and go vote. But I wanted to give the three of you a chance to respond to this. Maybe people shouldn't vote at all if they're true ideologues. What do you think?
There was another important point. I think that Shmuel said Likud is our home, and I'm very happy to hear that. I think that anybody who's right-wing should believe that Likud is our home, because the Likud is really a culmination of 90 years of the right, what you might call the right wing in Israel, in the Yishuv, in the Zionist movement, trying to burst out, there was a labor domination. There was this concessionist, Weitzman policy domination that Jabotinsky and Begin fought against their entire lives. And finally, one day in 1977, through strategy, through perseverance, they succeeded in becoming the leading party in Israel. And I think that anybody who wants to really seriously wants to move the country in the right direction, they should feel that the Likud is their home, and they should learn about the history. But Shmuel mentioned that there's a divide between the leadership and the members. And I think that relates to what Gil was talking about. Gil was saying that there are these people who don't want to vote. And that amuses me, because it's a classic thing that you see in Israel, is that people can't make up their minds about things, so they always have to play a game to trick the system. And that relates to what Shmuel said, because Shmuel said there's this divide. Why is there a divide between the leadership and the members? If there is such a divide, why is there that divide? Because Israeli politics, the political system, both in Likud and outside of Likud, is built on deals. It's built so that the actual voting, the actual deciding that's going on is happening in the deal-making process. These elections can change that.
First, I want you to comment on the question about people boycotting the elections. It's very, very funny to me, because, as you know, in Israel, unlike what most of us are accustomed to, we're accustomed to, from the States, voting for a person. Here in Israel, you vote for a party. The only time that you actually vote for a walking person, a real living and breathing person, is during the primaries. That's it. This is really the only time you could exercise your full democratic right. You could vote for a human being, as opposed to a piece of paper of which, I don't know how many of you have voted in the past, or how many of you are Olim Chadashim. You walk into the ballot box, the voting booth, and I always say Israel is extremely technologically advanced. Israel is super high-tech in all areas except voting day. And you put, the piece of paper into the envelope, and you put it in the box like they did in the caveman days. And the only time that you really vote for a person is in the primaries. So here we're having a primaries in 9 days, 10 days, a week from Tuesday. And people are boycotting. Why are they boycotting? What are they afraid of? They're afraid of, who's afraid of Virginia Woolf? Who's afraid of Moshe Feiglin? What are they afraid of? He's a member of Likud. He has received so many offers to leave Likud and has stayed loyal to Likud. There are so many Knesset members there today on the Likud list because of Moshe. He has shown his loyalty to Likud, and he will strengthen Likud. As a matter of fact, we know that recently Yair Lapid, who has just thrown his hat into the political ring, and there's going to be more hats thrown in there. Literally, a nice big black hat will be coming in from Aryeh Deri, who'll be throwing his hat into the ring, and others will be joining. This will be a very exciting elections coming up. Likud must be strong. There is one way, and only one way, for Likud to remain in power next time. They must go to the right. The center is much too congested. You're having a Yair Lapid, who I believe will form a some type of coalition with Aryeh Deri. You have Kadima that's falling off the map, Baruch Hashem. You have Shelley Yichimovich that has breathed some new life, done a Tchiyat Hametim to the Labour Party. A lot of things are happening. The only way that Likud will stay in power, which it must, is by going to the right. And the only way it will go to the right is if it has somebody standing at its helm who is opposed to a Palestinian state and who is really pro Jewish settlement in every inch of the land of Israel and Jewish education for every child in the country, and a real something that we could all look forward to and be proud of. After all, this is our dream. Look, I've told people many times, I understand Emmanuel, who's voting for Moshe and hoping that he not win. Moshe is not a candidate. Moshe is a revolution. You have to be ready for that. You really have to be ready for it. Silvan Shalom is a candidate. Gidon Sar is a candidate. These are all nice candidates. But if you know, and if you really see where Israel is headed, we don't need a candidate. We really need a revolution. I'm talking, of course, bloodless. I'm not talking about taking tanks onto the Knesset, God forbid. Civil war, of course, has to be avoided at all costs. I'm talking about unity. I'm talking about love. And I'm talking about spreading something to every Jew in this country. When you talk peace, half the country is for a Palestinian state, half is against, pro the peace process, against the peace process. That divides us. Talk settlements, it's a good way to start an argument in Israel. But talk Jewish values. Ask your average non-kippah wearing individual, do you want your son and daughter to learn about his or her heritage? Do you want them to know where they came from? Do you want them to understand what Shabbat is? We're not looking to put tefillin on the men or extra long skirts on the women. We're looking to educate through tolerance, through acceptance, and through love of every Jew.
Regarding the strategy of Manhigut Yehudit, there are other groups in Likud today who've been signing up nationalistic or more right-wing or people in the Yehuda v'Shomron, and that do not have the same strategy as Manhigut Yehudit. They just think that you shouldn't be out there saying that you want to change the leadership of Likud. You should try to be more discreet, and that's more efficient. So you have, for example, people like Sheva Stern and other people who actually have more power than Manhigut Yehudit in Yehuda v'Shomron, which is where they have 2/3 of the seats in all of Yehuda v'Shomron for the Central Committee.
They're the people organizing the boycott.
Okay, and of course it's another side, another proof of the ugly side of politics is that as an outsider you would find it hard to understand what exactly is the ideological difference between Manhigut Yehudit and other Yehuda v'Shomron people such as Sheva Stern, but they'd rather boycott the election than vote for Moshe Feiglin, which really, it's as I said, Israel sometimes is
the head of a branch.
right. It is also people like from people who live in Yehuda v'Shomron, but the same way that the country itself is run like a shtetl, the Likud is really run like a shul, where you have different factions of the Litzaim and the Mitnagdim and the Hasidim who hate each other and don't vote for each other, even though, ideologically and religiously, I would say they are identical. So I think that it's really sad that we reached this situation. But on the other hand, I think that the Prime Minister brought it upon himself by calling a snap election, by calling for an early election, and making sure that nobody is going to run, because of course Silvan Shalom and all the other candidates are not going to run against Bibi, so he's left with Moshe Feiglin, and in a way Feiglin has a lot of courage to do that. But it is a joke in a way that you have Feiglin against Bibi and nobody else, and the people in the Likud who are also Dati Leumi and who are also from and who also live in Yesha were boycotting Feiglin and the election. So the whole thing is turning into a joke. Unfortunately, I think the Prime Minister brought it upon himself. But as I said, whoever wants to boycott, I guess you can sue them now.
Why are people afraid of Moshe Feiglin, you asked? I read an article in the Jerusalem Post by Ruthie Bloom, and she had interviewed Moshe Feiglin. And there was a comment that she quoted that Moshe said, which I really didn't like, which was that it's about Judaism, not about Jabotinsky. And I think that that's part of the feeling that Manhigut Yehudit is looking to do. I mean, something that you said today was that Likud is our home. And there's a feeling sometimes that Manhigut Yehudit is not here to say Likud is our home, but we're going to transform it into our home. And that, and for instance, saying things like, well, Jabotinsky, he's not really that important in the totem pole of Zionist leaders and in Jewish history. And Menachem Begin, well, he's a no-goodnik who did the Sinai. I mean, we have to give credit where credit's due. I mean, this Jabotinsky was the guy who started everything. He is the Moses of the right wing. And whatever points we disagree with him or we don't disagree with him, that's just the way it is. That's the history. And that's one part of it. Another part of it is that Moshe has not yet served in the Knesset. I'd like to see what Moshe can do in the Knesset before he jumps to being a prime minister. For instance, Emmanuel is a professor. I've seen him do interviews. He knows his stuff. But I'm not going to vote for him for prime minister. Let him get to be a Knesset member. Let him get to be a minister. And let's, little by... I'm not saying you have to do indirect approach, what's efficient and what's not, but, I would like to see what somebody can do, what their management skills are, aside from just being a community organizer. Let's say like President Obama is a community organizer. I'd like to see something more than that before I vote for somebody for prime minister.